This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode, I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 356 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we are connecting novels and travel. If you are a lover of fiction, then you are in the right place to listen to some great stories today. First, let me pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, where I am recording this podcast. Now, in the Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers, last week I asked who likes to read a novel that's kind of relevant to their trip while they're travelling or beforehand, and I had so many answers. So I have just picked out a few of my favourites to share today because I would have to make a whole episode to tell you all of them. So Kim mentioned she'd read Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie on a trip to India back in 1997. It all still stays with her almost 30 years later. Andrew said, I'm currently on an overland trip from Istanbul to Beijing and reading Crime and Punishment in the tent at night. That sounds like a marvellous adventure in many ways. Nicole said, among many suggestions, she said, arriving in Athens and tracking down an English copy of Zorba the Greek. Felt like I had a secret insider insight as I travelled, having read that. Catherine said, I read Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground on the Transpolar Railway and Catherine Meredale's Lenin on the Train on the Trans-Siberian, and that she's currently reading Haldor Laxness's The Fish Can Sing in Iceland. Oh, these people on trips at the moment sound so lovely. Samantha said, I enjoyed reading Steinbeck while road tripping California, also A Room with a View while in Florence. Justin mentioned Jules Verne's Journey to the Centre of the Earth as a childhood favourite, but the tie-in to travel was Iceland, and he read the book again in Iceland, even went to see the volcano, Snæfellsjökull, I think, because the journey started from that point in the book, which I did not realise. Danielle mentioned she was reading The Beach again while she was in Thailand, after she first read it on her first trip there 25 years ago. Pretty cool. Maxine mentioned reading Pat Barker's trilogy, The Silence of the Girls, The Women of Troy, and The Voyage Home, on a trip to Greece and Turkey, and it absolutely added a new layer of depth and purpose to the trip. Pat Barker's an author I've forgotten about, and I used to love her books, must go back. And Celeste mentioned, in Honolulu, of course, Hotel Honolulu by Paul Theroux. So many good ideas and so many wonderful experiences. So it was very heartwarming to see that I am definitely not alone in loving the idea of picking out novels that are set in the place that you're visiting, because it really does bring a whole new dimension to your trip. Now, someone else who's done that is Carol McQuaid. Carol's an artist, and she spent quite a chunk of time teaching art on cruise ships lately, circling the world. And last year we recorded this chat where she told me how she also loves to read fiction to tie in with her experiences.
For me, maybe for everybody, the joy of a trip is never contained within the trip, right? It's from the moment of the inception, like the thought and the planning and all of that. And so I like to seek out trip-based fiction and read my brains out before I ever get on the plane. And so when I approached this around the world voyage at the start of this year, I made a list of 25 books that are set along our path. And I put it up on my blog, and I, kind of put all the links out there, and in case friends wanted to read along with me. And, some did in spots. That was fun. But it colored my trip in such an amazing way. For example, we are here in Burnie, Tasmania right now. I read Flames by Robbie Arnott. I don't know if you've heard of this book.
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
It was like, I felt like I had walked all over Tasmania before I ever got here. It's this wonderful kind of magical realism feast of, myth and travel and, just kind of rowdy Tasmanian dudes. and it's pretty fabulous. And that was just one of the books that really colored my experience. And if I started reading a book, like there were a couple I started and went, this isn't doing it. So I would seek out, I'd be in every bookstore or used bookstore along the path and say, like, what's a great story? I don't want a guidebook. I don't want to know, the geological formation of whatever or how many penguins walked here. I want a good, juicy story. So when I'm traveling around, I have that. I feel like I know someone from here. So I've done a ton of that. In the book that I put out, I reserve a page at the end of each chapter that shows everything I read and then everything I bought during that little time span. And I just, since then I've discovered this whole world of trip fiction, all kinds of sites, and I'm on lists now, and I'm like, oh, surprise, you're not the only person who does this, right? But what a difference it makes. And now, next week, on the very ship that I am teaching on right now, is the literary festival at sea for Australia. So I've madly been reading like Cassie Hamer and all of these other books of the writers who are going to be on the ship.
Brilliant.
And I'm just like, yeah, either they've got to come to my class or I've got to make sure that I accost them in the halls if they're speaking while I'm teaching. But I'm super excited to connect with all of these writers and just it's fun how life hands you this. Okay, you put all this work in reading these books. We'll give you the literary festival at sea.
Yeah, that is so perfect. I'm so jealous.
Yeah. I'll take notes. I'll send them to you.
Yes, please. Yeah. Oh no, you are so a woman after my own heart, because that is one of my very favorite and kind of must do things before I'm visiting somewhere, is to find novels that are set in those destinations, because it is, you can find the facts and figures anywhere, but to hear or to read a story set, it just gives you an entirely new perspective on a place. So.
Yeah. I'm going to South America and Antarctica at the start of next year. And of course, Paul Theroux's Patagonia Express is the first book on my list.
Perfect. Carol really has taken the concept of trip fiction very seriously. There's amazing posts on her blog, on her website, showing some of the examples. And I will leave a link in the show notes to Carol's original big list of fiction to read on her trip, which she mentioned in our chat. My next guest is Louis Hall, and Louis has a fabulous argument for why reading fiction might actually be more relevant to your travels than the typical non-fiction travel narratives that we often read.
Yes, I think I perhaps maybe get overly inspired by fiction, but the best things do come from the imagination. And I remember when I was living in London, wanting to create. Well, I was feeling quite, as most young people do at some stage, feel quite restless and wanting answers and what have you. And I came across a book called Don Quixote, and which is a fictional book about an old man who reads all these tales of sort of adventure and chivalry and gets so inspired that he wants to make what he's reading become real in his life. And he goes out and does all these escapades, and they all end up ultimately failing. And he comes back kind of disenchanted. But when I was reading this book, it had the same effect that his reading had on him. It inspired a simple theme or thought, which is a quote that he uses a lot, which is, "Maddest of all is to see life as it is and not as it should be," which is essentially something that I think is universally applicable with any form of travel, or stepping outside the comfort zone, or stepping outside or stepping into the unknown and into the uncertain. It's ultimately a kind of it's a movement of hope. It's a movement of like possibility. That's what adventure for me really is. It's like, well, you don't know what's going to be there, but you're wanting to find something new, something more, perhaps something inside yourself that is out there. And fiction does that. As Don Quixote is obviously just one book. It is, for fiction wise, it's the most sold book of all time, and it has a kind of quite a strength in the impact. However, there's multiple hero and heroine tales over the last 2-3 centuries that do that exact same thing, which is to take very truthful, objective themes in our human experience and put them into a fictional context. And that, for me, is sometimes even more inspirational than reading, non-fictional travel or people's adventures that they write down and tell you, I did this, what are you going to do, kind of thing. I feel like there's often a bit of a distance there. However, fiction is for everyone, from our childhood onwards, and it's those stories that instill in us, or certainly instilled in me, a real sense of possibility, because they are applicable not just to someone from a certain background or a certain country doing a certain skill that I don't have. It's actually, well, no, these are real inner longings and yearnings and universal feelings that we all share, no matter where you are or who you are, where you come from. So fiction for me is so important, I think, in adventure and travel. And it certainly has inspired me. It's been one of the biggest inspirations for sure in me in attempting to do my travels. Yeah.
That's so well put. I've never really thought about it like that, but it absolutely makes sense. I feel like if you read a nonfiction travel narrative, it sort of feels like it's inspiring you to go and do the same thing, to kind of replicate that. Whereas a fictional journey and something like Don Quixote is more like it inspires you more inwardly and more philosophically, and then you can apply that in whatever way suits your circumstances.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because it's obviously a made up set of circumstances that you're being told about, and it's obviously fantastical and it's obviously unbelievable. However, the sentiment is the same, and so when you read it and spend time, thinking about it when you go through your everyday stuff, it resonates with you personally and only you, and that's when your own understanding or your own interpretation of what adventure is to you then comes live. It might be something as small as, walking without a phone for 3 days along an old drover's road in the UK or wherever you are in the world. Or it might just be trying to spot and name all the trees and birds around in the local park for, the next week. Or it might be something with a bike or a canoe or whatever it is. But it becomes very personal, very possible that way, because you're not being told someone's extraordinary, feats. Because then, like you say, you just think, okay, well, I need to do that because that's what they've just told me. But it's actually, it welcomes in, it embraces you, and it welcomes in it welcomes in you basically as a person, and then you interpret that to make what's possible for you.
I really like Louis' ideas, and I think that reading a novel does spark our imagination in so many ways. And I think when we know we're reading a novel, it gives us permission to dream up other ideas. When we're reading a nonfiction travel narrative, then it sort of shuts down our imagination in some way because we're being told this is what it was like and this is what happened. So I think, I agree that reading novels that are set where we're traveling is a fabulous way to really enrich our travels. Now, my final guest today is Jonny Wright, and Jonny has also given this topic some thought and come up with some very good, interesting philosophical approaches to reading before and during our travels.
I think there's already a lot about travel that involves contrast. I think that's much of what makes travel magnetic for a lot of people is the experience of contrast, right? We come from a culture or a set of cultures, and we are thrown into another culture or another set of cultures, and we get to experience contrast in the foods and the sights and the sounds, right? So these things are already built into kind of the allure of travel, right?
True.
But for me, as someone who loved to read way before I love to travel, reading was a way of getting to experience other lives and other worlds. And it was a way of bringing contrast and richness into my life. So when I was young, I was not at all interested in travel. I really wasn't interested in travel until about 3 years ago when I had some dramatic changes. And that experience of reading was something that shaped myself when I was young. It was a way that even though I was just a little kid growing up in the suburbs, I could kind of inhabit these minds of people who were from far away and who lived at other times in history. And so it just provided this richness and allowed for that contrast in my life. And now that I am traveling a lot, literature actually performs a kind of heightened thing. Now I've become much more invested in my own experiences, right? The experience that my full self, including my body, gets to have. So literature doesn't have quite the same, maybe allure that it once did, because now I am a more embodied human. I have more agency, and I get to move about the world and live my own story. So I'm no longer looking for another story to kind of substitute for a lack of my story, right? I am living my story now, which is really exciting. But now literature can become something that provides even a further contrast to those experiences of travel. And I have had so many wonderful moments of picking up a book in an apartment or a bookshop and just sitting down, even just for a couple minutes, reading a few pages and finding that life and those thoughts of someone far away and from another time spring to life inside me as I am experiencing this contrast around me with my own body.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a powerful thing. It creates it almost feels like I can feel the new synapses, in my brain just because
ping,
of
ping,
this.
Ping, yeah.
Yeah. Just because of kind of the emergence of ideas, the emergence of images that are shooting through my mind and then coming in through my senses, right? It's this swirl of newness that happens that excites me so much. And it's very rejuvenating as well, even when travel can become really tiring and a lot. I remember one time I was in Kosovo and I had just been camping out in North Macedonia for a couple weeks. And I'd been on the road a while and I was actually very close to going home because I was almost fed up with my travels at that point. And I just decided I'm going to continue on and head into Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in Kosovo walking around, trying to just rest a little bit after some strenuous stuff. And I wandered into this bookshop and it's kind of funny. I picked up a autobiography of Barack Obama, which was sitting on there. There were tons of copies, and I thought it was kind of ironic since I'm halfway across the world.
Yeah.
Here's Barack Obama. And so I picked that up and started to read. And even within the first few pages of him describing his walk to the White House every day and to the Oval Office, that description and sort of imagining the weight of responsibility, the rigidness of every single hour of his day, it all of a sudden loosened so much inside me because I was recognizing just how free I was at that moment. I didn't have a care in the world, really, and I had forgotten that, right?
Yeah.
I'd become tired and listless because I'd gotten used to that freedom. I didn't know what to do with myself. And in a matter of a couple pages, it completely reoriented me. And I said, wow, I am living an enchanted life right now. So there have been so many of those moments. I mean, I could talk about reading Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf in Istanbul. That was a very powerful experience. Or reading about Zen in Thailand, or reading about William James in Izmir. For me, I love to happen upon books and just allow those to spring up for me, right? But there's something very energizing about the immediacy of picking up a book that you just find, that comes to you, that you don't have so much control over. Again, it comes back to sort of a loss of control. Instead of having a whole library at my fingertips,
Exactly.
there might just be a couple books on a bookshelf that's nearby, and I pick up one of them, I sit down and see what comes out.
That is the beauty, absolute beauty of books, especially fiction, but anything. And I think it's almost a shame now, now that we can travel with a Kindle and we do have access to, any book we want. But I've got so many examples over my own travels as well of, being in a hostel somewhere and there's, hardly any books in English, but you pick one up and it becomes kind of really entangled with your memories of that place as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, you've described it well. You've got the world of the book gets in your mind as well as the world around you. And my favorite time ever was I did plan this one though. I read Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment as I was on the Trans-Siberian crossing Russia.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's just so entangled with
That's
that
great.
trip in my mind. And
Yeah.
and if I ever pull it off the shelf and read a little bit, I feel like I'm transported right back to that train. I really do have fond memories both of the Dostoevsky read on the Trans-Siberian and probably a good dozen other books that, especially the random hostel books that I picked up, back in my 20s when I travelled. And they're just really evocative of really good times and really good stories. So, thank you very much for listening to episode 356 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. It was exciting to think about how we can connect novels to travel. And as promised, I will leave a link to Carol's a blog post with her reading list. But there are also lots of great lists around the internet if you're searching for like trip fiction or, novels set in certain places. It's something I very, very often do before I travel somewhere because it really just gives you a whole different perspective. Speaking of novels and fiction, if you are in Perth or Western Australia or likely to be here in October, I am very lucky to be an assistant director of the Festival of Fiction here in Perth. Just another hat I wear. Some writer friends roped me into this and it has been fabulous. Last year we ran a one-day festival. This year it's double that and in 2 theatres. So we've got lots of really amazing writers coming, some from East Coast Australia, lots of local West Aussie writers as well. It's running on the 18th and 19th of October. As I record this, our tickets are getting close to being sold out. So hop on and buy them quickly if you can. You can find out all about that at festivaloffiction.com.au. And of course, thank you to my guests, Carol McQuaid, the illustrated vagabond. So I'll leave a link to that blog post of hers and also to her newest book, which is the South American Sketchbook. She publishes amazing books that combine her sketches and pictures that have been created while she's traveling the world teaching art to others. Thank you also to Louis Hall. You can find out more about Louis at louisdhall.com. And I'll also leave a link to Louis's book, In Green, 2 Horses, 2 Strangers, A Journey to the End of the Land. And lastly, a big thanks to Jonny Wright. You can find out more about Jonny's Instagram and podcast. So I've got a link to his Instagram, Go and Find Out Pod. And his podcast is Go and Find Out. Super lovely storytelling. So do look that up wherever you get your podcast. Of course, don't forget to come and chat about all of this. We've got plenty of time to talk about more novels we love or more novels you have loved on your travels. Come to the Facebook or LinkedIn groups for Thoughtful Travellers. Just search for Thoughtful Travellers in those spots. Sign up for the Thoughtful Travellers newsletter at thoughtfultravel.substack.com. All of these links and everything else will be in the show notes. For this episode, they are at notaballerina.com/356. Happy reading, and as always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.